Having discussed the environmental laws present in India, the next topic in this unit is international agreements. The first international agreement that we are going to discuss is Montreal Protocol. Montreal, this place is in Canada, and this protocol is on the substances that deplete ozone layer. Earlier we have studied about ozone layer, that it is a protective layer in the stratosphere and it protects the life on the earth from harmful ultraviolet radiations. So this protocol deals with the substances or regulates the substances that are responsible for depletion of ozone layer. Now this international agreement was signed in, or it was made in 1987. Okay, so Montreal Protocol is an international agreement to protect ozone layer by phasing out production of ozone depleting substances. What are these ozone depleting substances? Earlier also we have seen that in the 20th century use of chlorofluorocarbons was increasing in various products or articles of daily use such as refrigerators. Okay, so but in 1970s and 80s the effect of chlorofluorocarbons as ozone depleting substances became evident. This was because discoveries were made highlighting the adverse effects of chlorofluorocarbons on the ozone levels in the stratosphere. Okay, and ozone hole over the Antarctica was also discovered. So international discussions were held on these issues, that whether we should use substances containing chlorofluorocarbons or not, or the products containing chlorofluorocarbons or not, in the light of the environment, safety of the environment and the ozone layer. So international discussions were held, and subsequently Vienna Convention was adopted in the year 1985. It is also a convention for protection of ozone layer. Montreal Protocol comes under Vienna Convention. Okay, this agreement was made in 1987. So 16 September 1987, remember this date. It was a date when the Montreal Protocol was made, but it came into force in 1st January 1989. Okay, 16 September is also remembered as the International Day for Preservation of Ozone Layer. Now, how many parties or different countries have ratified Montreal Protocol? There are 198 parties that have ratified the Montreal Protocol. So you should remember why Montreal Protocol came into existence. That in the year 1970s and 80s, the discoveries were made highlighting the adverse effects of chlorofluorocarbons and other human activities, that is use of chlorofluorocarbons and other human activities on the levels of ozone present in the stratosphere, and ozone hole was also discovered. So the need was felt in the light of environment protection to make an agreement so that the countries, they become conscious of this phenomena. Okay, it is considered as one of the most successful international agreement. Now what is done in the Montreal Protocol? A mandatory timetable is set by the protocol to phase out ozone depleting substance. That means they will give you a number of chemicals and they will set a deadline that by this year this country should phase out this chemical. Phase out means the production should be stopped, or production should be completely the product should be completely eliminated. Okay, no production should be seen. So they give a timetable, that is a deadline for various ozone depleting chemicals, and by that particular year one has to completely phase out that substance. So there is a mandatory timetable. You should remember that there are many international agreements which are not obligatory or compulsory to follow, but Montreal Protocol is a timetable which is mandatory, or it is a obligatory agreement. If a party is signatory to this agreement, then it has to obey the target set by this protocol. Okay, and then they review regularly, okay, whether the substance has been phased out or not. Let us take examples of chlorofluorocarbons. India has itself phased out many chemicals with respect to Montreal Protocol. Okay, so the review is done regularly to see whether the countries have actually phased out the chemicals or not. Okay, and these phased out dates, that is, a deadline, is often accelerated, or it is the countries are told to phase out these substances early. Okay, so as and when the scientific understanding increases and the technology advances, that means a new substitute is found in place of chlorofluorocarbons. Suppose a particular chemical is used in a particular process or a particular product. Now when technology advances, you develop substitutes, that I have found another chemical which is less harmful to the ozone layer. In that case, what happens? They try to phase out the old chemicals which were harmful. So as and when the scientific understanding increases and technology advances, the phase out dates or the deadline is accelerated, or it comes early, that if a substance was to be phased out within 5 years, now the substance can be phased out within 3 years because we have an alternative for that. Okay, so review is also done regularly, and it is considered as a most successful international agreement. Okay, now what are the results of this agreement on the Montreal Protocol? They are very positive because ozone depletion over Antarctica has slowed down. That means the process of ozone depletion over Antarctica has slowed down. It is not occurring at the rate at which it was occurring at the past. Okay, because many of the ozone depleting substances, they have been removed. Then which are these ozone depleting substances? See, most of all of them are the ones containing either chlorine or bromine. Okay, so these are basically the chlorofluorocarbons, chlorine or bromine. Mostly these are the ones containing chlorine or bromine. However, nitrous oxides, we have learned this before also, that nitrous oxide is also responsible for ozone layer depletion, but nitrous oxide is not controlled under the Montreal Protocol. That means it does not give any deadline to phase out nitrous oxide. Okay, then yes, it provides a timetable for reduction and subsequent elimination of ozone depleting substance. We have discussed this before, that how the timetable is given. It includes a 10-year phase out for developing countries. That means the phase or the time limit or the deadline which is given for developing countries to phase out a particular ozone depleting substances is around 10 years. This might be reduced for developed countries, but for developing countries it is around 10 years. See, this is a very good illustration where implementation of Montreal Protocol, how India has implemented the provisions of this protocol and what are its achievements, and they are very significant. Okay, so at the bottom you can see that in the 1987 India became party to the Montreal Protocol. Okay, so 1987 the protocol was the agreement came into force. Okay, and then India became party to this in 1992. Then the country's program regarding the ozone depleting substance was made in 1993. Then India laid down the ozone depleting substances regulation and control rules in the year 2000. Then it targeted the chlorofluorocarbons, carbon tetrachloride, halon, and methyl bromide. They were subsequently completely phased out from India. Okay. Then further, it tried to phase out HCFC, hydrochlorofluorocarbons. Again, these are considered as less potent in terms of ozone depletion when it comes to chlorofluorocarbons. So when we compared HCFCs to CFCs, HCFCs are less potent, but still India has phased out the HCFCs. It has a management plan. Okay. Then again, HCFC is phased out subsequently. Okay, and further in 2007, India played a critical role in adoption of Kigali Agreement. Kigali Agreement is again an agreement to Montreal Protocol for phase down of hydrofluorocarbons. Okay, so India has incorporated the provisions of this protocol in its national laws also. That means it has made certain rules. See, the ozone depleting rules were made way back in 2000. So India has very effectively acted on this, the provisions which are made, and it has implemented those provisions so as to reduce the ozone depleting substances. Then the achievement of Montreal Protocol. See, this is all over the world. What are the achievements? See, Antarctic zone hole is no longer increasing in size. I told you before also, the rate at which the depletion was happening over Antarctica has slowed down if we compare it in the past. So, Antarctic zone hole is no longer increasing in size. Then ozone depleting substance phase out has significantly contributed in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, so again, the greenhouse gas emissions, because chlorofluorocarbons are also one of the greenhouse gases only, so that is also reduced. One way United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change is targeting carbon emissions, here Montreal Protocol is targeting CFCs. So we are targeting two major greenhouse gases. Okay, so CFCs are also decreased, and therefore greenhouse gases are emission is decreased, and therefore global warming will be reduced. Okay, now what are the positive effects that it has avoided damages to agriculture and fisheries around the world? We have seen how odious they damage the environment, and about 98% of these substances, that is ozone depleting substances, are phased out globally. Globally means in the entire world. Around 98% of these substances are completely removed. This is a very positive step. Okay, now phase out of ODs led to saving of 135 billion tons of CO2 equivalent of atmospheric emissions. So this is again a positive step. Okay, why it is important? Because all of these are greenhouse gases, ultimately leading to ozone layer depletion and warming of the atmosphere, and we have seen what adverse effects global warming possesses to the environment. Therefore it is a significant, or it is the most successful agreement all over the world. So looking at the bottom, you can see India's achievement, that India played a crucial role in adoption of Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol for phase down of hydrofluorocarbons. So India has also taken this challenge. India has met its compliance targets under ongoing HCFC phase out. Okay, so whatever targets India has set in the past it has met those targets. Okay, so this is a positive step when we uh, discuss about the India's achievements with respect to Montreal Protocol. And having understood Montreal Protocol, let us look at the second international agreement, which is Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto, this place is in Japan. Okay. Kyoto Protocol is extension of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. We have discussed about this again before. Okay, so now United Nations Framework Convention, it is committed initially to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, so it is the Kyoto Protocol is nothing but the extension of this goal. Okay, Kyoto Protocol was adopted in 1997, but it went into effect only in 2005. Okay, now it applies to greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane, perfluorocarbons, hydrofluorocarbons, and sulfur hexafluorides. So most of these are the greenhouse gases. And in 2012 it was amended, or it was extended with this Doha Amendment. See, according to this protocol, a common but differentiated responsibility was established. Now, what is this common but differentiated responsibility? See, industrial revolution began in Europe, okay, and technological advancements have taken place in countries like Europe, United States, Canada, which are mostly the developed countries. So they were held responsible for the emissions of greenhouse gases, and they were given a more you can say more responsibility in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions, because they were technologically advanced, and when we compare the greenhouse gas emissions of these countries with those of developing countries, they were uh, far more greater. Okay, therefore they were held more responsible. So there is a common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities. Okay, so what is done here is that it established a system of carbon credits. Carbon credits means what? See, it divides the countries into two parts, so developed countries and developing countries. So developed countries, what they will do, they will carry out emission reduction projects, okay, or I can say clean technology projects in the developing countries. Okay, and for that they will earn certain carbon credits. See, carbon credits is a definite number of carbon emissions that a particular country can emit. Okay, so it is suppose if a country finishes its carbon credit, okay, it cannot emit carbon emissions more than those credits. So to earn credits, it has to do a cleaner technology project in a developing country. Okay, so this is how the common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities is the principle is established. Okay, so definitely the developed countries were held more accountable for the greenhouse gas emissions. And also developing countries have asked the developed countries under this Kyoto Protocol to mobilize around $100 billion, so to the developing countries, so that so as to compensate for the greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, okay, so that was about the Kyoto Protocol. And this protocol demands that 37 developed nations they work together to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, then having understood Montreal Protocol, Kyoto Protocol, let us now look at the Convention on Biological Diversity. Convention on Biological Diversity is a multilateral treaty for biodiversity conservation. So far we have seen that there is an agreement for ozone layer depletion, then there is an agreement for greenhouse gas emissions. Now there is also an agreement for protection or conservation of biodiversity, which is Convention on Biological Diversity. Now this convention was opened for signature in Rio Earth Summit in the year 1992, but it entered into force in the year 1993. The secretariat of this convention is at Montreal, that is in Canada. It is ratified by 196 members except the United States. The governing body or conference of parties meet every 2 years to review the of progress made by the countries in respect of this convention. Then it again sets priorities in terms of biodiversity conservation and commits the work plans. So there are three main objectives of this convention. Okay, the first is conservation of biological diversity or conservation of biodiversity. Second, sustainable use of its components. Sustainable use means the components of biodiversity have to be used today in such a manner that they will be available for use in the future. So, future generations should also get benefited from the components of biodiversity, that is, sustainable use of its component. And the third is fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising out of the utilization of genetic resources. So we are going to discuss this in detail when we'll discuss about the other two protocols in under this convention. So see, parties they acknowledge that there is the special provision is needed to meet the needs of developing countries, particularly the least developed and the small island countries. So they have to be given the additional financial resources, and appropriate technology should also be given to them. Okay, because developed countries they can have an easy access to technology, but the least developed countries and the small island countries they should be given the technologies. Okay, also the global environment facility, remember this name, it governs the needs of developing countries in meeting the demands. So financial resources are provided by this global environment facility to the developing countries in meeting the demands with respect to this convention. Having understood the basics of basic information about the Convention on Biological Diversity, let us see what is Nagoya Protocol. Okay, Nagoya is a place in Japan, and this protocol is supplementary agreement to Convention on Biological Diversity. Now, this protocol acknowledges the access to genetic resources and fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the utilization of these genetic resources. See, what are genetic resources? Genetic resources are basically the living plants, animals, and microorganisms. So, many tribal communities they have traditional knowledge and they have expertise with respect to these resources, which are found in the forest or wild. Okay, and particularly in the least developed countries and developing countries, the tribals they have a rich knowledge of these living plants, animals, and microbes, which can be actually um, used in various ways for any treatment of any disease, okay, or to improve the health of an individual. So all of these there has to be, if these resources, that is plants, animals, and microbes, if they have to be used, then there has to be a fair and equitable or equal sharing of whatever benefits are derived from these resources. Okay, see, See, genetic resources, like a plant may be producing a chemical which might have a medicinal use. Okay, then there might be genes present in the plants which confer drought resistance. So, any of the benefits that are arising from the use of these genetic resources, there has to be fair and equitable sharing of the benefits. Now, Nagoya Protocol, it was adopted in 2010, but it entered into force in 2014. That means 4 years after its adoption, it entered into force, and it is ratified by about 137 parties. Okay. It covers the traditional knowledge which is associated with the genetic resources. Traditional knowledge, I told you, traditional knowledge, every country has some traditional knowledge about the living plants, animals, or whatever biodiversity is present in its area. Particularly the developing and the small island countries, they have large number of tribal groups which have highly important information regarding these genetic resources or biodiversity. So, all of it is covered under the Nagoya Protocol. Hmm? So, it creates obligations. Again, this is obligatory. It creates obligations for members to incorporate measures. What measures? In respect of access to genetic resources, sharing of benefits, and compliance. That means all the members, they will make certain laws in their country so that the benefits that are arising from the genetic resources, they will be shared equally, and everybody will have access to these resources. Okay, that should not be limited to any particular group, but everybody will have access. This is a very significant step in the conservation of biodiversity because it protects the indigenous people from being exploited for their traditional knowledge and expertise. See, developed countries, particularly what they do, they will take a particular process. Earlier also there are many cases where they have taken traditional knowledge from the developing countries on the small island states, particularly the tribal groups, and they have actually manufactured those chemicals or important medicinal drugs on large scale, and they have derived benefit from by selling those medicines. So such things should not happen. Okay, so the rights of indigenous people, uh, so as to so as to protect themselves from being exploited, is recognized under the Nagoya Protocol. Okay. Again, there is also a dispute resolution mechanism to resolve any disputes arising from the utilization of resources. Again, the dispute resolution mechanism, see, sometimes what happens, a mountain or biodiversity protected area is present between two different countries. Okay, in that case, this dispute arises that who should and when should access the who should access first of all the biodiversity resources. So that in that case, there is a dispute resolution mechanism in Nagoya Protocol regarding the utilization of resources. India has ratified this protocol in the year 2012. Okay, so it is extremely important that the biodiversity knowledge, whatever is present in any traditional form, has to be equally shared, and these people should not be exploited. In India, we have an act for that, Biological Diversity Act 2002, which implements the provisions of this protocol. Okay, India had enacted this law way before, and the provisions of the protocol are covered under this act. Okay, having understood the Nagoya Protocol, let us look at the Cartagena Protocol. Cartagena, this process is this place is present in Colombia. Okay, now Cartagena Protocol is based on the biosafety. Okay, biosafety with respect to whom? Living modified organisms. For this, you have to understand what is a living modified organism. Earlier, the name was genetically modified organism. Now you must have got some idea that what is this living modified organism. See, genetically modified organisms are plants or animals or microorganisms. They contain gene from some other plant or other animal or other microorganism. Okay, some other species. And what is there, the genes are present or they confer certain character to these plants. That means if I get suppose there are two plants and one plant is highly resistant to drought conditions, okay, and I want to insert that gene into another plant where I want this character to be seen. So what I'll do, I will insert this gene into the plant. So what I did, I modified the plant which originally did not have drought resistance. So these are called as living modified organisms. So such organisms are known as living modified organisms. Now how do they find use in why biosafety issues are there with respect to these organisms? See, when you alter the genetic makeup of any species, you don't know how it will behave in the environment. When you, what will be the behavior of this species in the environment, whether it is harmful to other living plants, or when humans consume such plants, do they have any allergies? So all of these genetically modified organisms, they have uh, various issues. This is in the United States. They have a different counter for genetically modified vegetables and a different counter for the normal vegetables. So nobody knows. There is no proper research, extensive research, that how GMOs can affect um, human population at large. So the it might cause allergies in some, it might not cause allergies in some. So biosafety is utmost important when it comes to the environment. Okay, and when one exports such genetically modified organisms or living modified organisms across the border, that is to the other countries, least developed countries or the developing nations, they do not have that much capability to cope up with the disaster if GMO is causing in the environment. They do not have the capability. So there has to be biosafety measures. The developing countries or any country for that matter who is importing the living modified organism has to be aware what will be the environmental consequences of this imported living modified organism in its country. So all these provisions are governed under Cartagena Protocol. Okay. Again, it is a supplementary agreement to Convention on Biological Diversity. It was adopted in the year 2000 but entered into force in 2003. It protects the biodiversity from the risks caused by LMOs. Just now I explained what are the risks that LMOs possess. Okay. Now there is a provision for advance informed agreement. Advance informed agreement means what? The countries that is importing the living modified organism, it will have proper information or enough information what is the nature of that LMO. Okay, what was transferred, what are the uh, effects to what groups, all the information has been given. So it's very important when it comes to biosafety. There are four components of this advance informed agreement. That notification is given by the exporter. Okay, a notification of what? There is a detailed written description of living modified organism. That is, what is this living modified organism, what gene it has, what are the effects, all of the detailed written description is given. Second, acknowledgement of notification received by the importer. Okay. Third, the decision procedure. That means, yes, the importing country is aware that this LMO is entering my country and I have made a decision to import that LMO, that is decision procedure. And again, review of the decisions. See, once I have imported this product, again I'm going to review whether this was the LMO was safe to my environment or not. Okay. Then it has a biosafety clearing house. Biosafety clearing house, it provides information to the countries on these living modified organisms. Suppose I am party to the Cartagena Protocol and a new novel product has come into market. Okay, living modified organism or genetically modified organism has come into market, and I want some information on that product. So I can access the biosafety clearing house, which is established under this protocol. Okay, I can get all the information regarding the LMO. So LMOs, it covers the intentionally introduced trees, seeds, then fish. Okay, living modified fish, seeds, trees. Also it has certain farm commodities like food grains, then corn. All of these are included in this Cartagena protocol. Okay, so that was all about the international agreements that we have to discuss from the syllabus. So let us now see so far what we have covered. See, in the beginning we discussed about the Environment Protection Act 1986. Okay, so this was enacted by the government of India so as to, or in pursuance of the Stockholm Conference, which was held in 1972. And this is an umbrella legislation. Umbrella legislation means it is a holistic law to cover wider aspects of the environment. Then the central government is basically authorized under this act to what? To protect and improve the environmental quality, to reduce the pollution, to prohibit or restrict the operation of any industrial facility. So for this matter, who establishes the authorities? Central government establishes the authorities. Authorities means any board or any institution or any officer for that matter. So the power is vested with the central government in this act. Okay. What were the objectives? That basic objective is the environment safety. Okay, and to give a comprehensive legislation for environment protection. That was the objective. Okay, anyone who is damaging the environment will be given stringent punishment. Stringent punishment means what? Strict punishment. Okay, then to encourage the sustainable development. Sustainable development, I told you that whatever resource you are utilizing today, it should find use in the future also, isn't it? Then what were the compositions? That it has had 4 chapters and 26 sections. Then we have discussed all the details of those chapters. That chapter 1 contains preliminary information, chapter 2 gives general powers of the government. All of these we have discussed. Then chapter 3 gives central government the power to take action. Chapter 4 allows government to appoint the officers. So all of this we have seen. Officers can also inspect a place, and it also deals with handling of hazardous substance. So not only the protection of environment and the pollution, but also hazardous substance, they come under this act. So inspection, the power of inspection is also given to the officers. Yes, penalties also are there. So if someone does not follow the provisions of this act, or while someone violates this act, then there are penalties. Okay. Then, having discussed the Environment Protection Act, we have discussed the Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1981. So again, this act was enacted in pursuance of the Stockholm Conference. Okay, Environment Protection Act, Air Act, Water Act, all of these are enacted under the Article 253 of the Indian Constitution. Article 253, it says or it gives powers to the Indian Parliament so as to enact laws, so as to pursue any international agreement. So again, Air Act, the objectives are very clear, that prevention, control and abatement of air pollution. Abatement means reduction of air pollution. Very, very important. It has defined air pollutant. First of all, what is the meaning of an air pollutant? It has defined. Then what is air pollution also it has defined. So presence of pollutant and what is pollution also it has defined. Very important, Air Act in 1987 it was amended to include noise pollution also. So noise pollution is dealt by the Air Act. Okay, there are two boards established under this act. One is the Central Pollution Control Board and other is the State Pollution Control Board. So Central Pollution Control Board will advise the central government. State Pollution Control Board will advise the state government. All the union territories, they also fall under the, or the powers are present with the Central Pollution Control Board. Then we have seen the functions of Central Pollution Control Board, that is the prevention, abatement and control of air pollution in the country and advise the central government. Then plan and implement a nationwide program. Okay, then coordinate the activities of various states, give technical assistance to these boards, okay, state boards particularly. And also it can establish laboratories for the research if it wants to take. Then mass media program, okay, also publishing the statistical data. Then air quality standards, we have discussed this chart, air quality index chart. Also there is a board, you might happen to see this in Shivajinagar Chowk, that there is a board which gives you the air quality. Okay, sometimes they also give you the concentration of various chemicals present in the air. And so this, if you happen to visit that Chowk, please see the chart. Okay, then the functions of the State Pollution Control Board. Again, the State Pollution Control Board has the same function, that is prevention, control or abatement of air pollution, but it advises the state government. Okay, then collection and dissemination of information, inspection of the industrial plant. If it is emitting air pollutant, it can inspect the industrial plant. Then the laying down of the standards for emissions of air pollutants. So I told you about these smog towers. This was set up in the Delhi, New Delhi. So they are basically the air purifiers. Very innovative thought. Then penalties are there. If there is violation of the act, there are certain penalties. But if an appellate authority is established for giving or deciding the punishment under this act, then the civil courts cannot entertain any suit or the proceedings. Then we have discussed about the Wildlife Protection Act. Wildlife Protection Act, again it is a legislation to protect wildlife, that is plants and animals. Jurisdiction has entire India. There are 6 schedules, okay, with varying degrees of protection. Then yes, it was amended in 1982, 86, 91, 93, and now also the Rajya Sabha has passed the recent amendment. So we have also discussed the various protected areas that are established under this act. Sanctuaries are established, national parks are established, conservation reserves are established, then community reserves are there and tiger reserves are there. All of these we have discussed in detail. And also the person who is appointed by the state to control, manage and maintain all the sanctuaries is the chief wildlife warden. Okay, then we have discussed what are the objectives of the act, that it prohibits the hunting of wild animals. Okay, I told you poaching and hunting, that is prohibited. Why? Because animals are poached so as to obtain any part of their body, like the horns and the teeth, okay, then the skin of the animal. So that all of it is not permitted. Here the powers to punish are given to the officers. Also it supports certain convention, CITES is one of them, Man and Biosphere program, and to regulate the trade in wildlife. Then we have discussed what is Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act. Okay, so this act is also enacted in the year 1974, but it is also enacted so as to pursue in pursuance of the um, Stockholm Conference, declaration made at the Stockholm Conference. The primary aim is to prevent and control water pollution. Okay, see, if there is any water pollution, then the maintenance and restoration works can also be done in terms of all surface and groundwater. Okay, then there are boards established, central and state boards. Okay, and also there are certain standards for the discharge that has been discharge of the sewage or the pollutants into the water body, which are laid by these boards. But there is a complete restriction, or it prohibits the disposal of any poisonous, noxious, or polluting matter. Also, there are punishments for violation of this act. Okay, there is a provision for joint board in this act. Then functions of central board, again they are the same, that they will advise the central government, then they will coordinate the activities of various state boards, they will publish the statistical data, they will establish the laboratories, because if they want to establish any fact, or they want to say that the water is containing pollutant, they will first have to do some analysis of water sample. For that they have to establish laboratories. Then the state board, that again there is a the comprehensive program in terms of prevention, control, and abatement of pollution of streams and wells, and its execution. The comprehensive program is prepared by the state government or the state board. It advises the state governments on the matters. It has the powers to inspect any water body which is receiving any uh, sewage or trade effluents. Okay, and also if there are some new methods, technological methods which can help reduce the problem, they will try to bring that into effect. Then also it sets up the this act sets up the central water laboratory and state water laboratory. Again, if any appellate authority is established to decide the matters under this act, then civil courts cannot entertain the suits. Okay, then we have discussed about the Forest Conservation Act. Why there was a need for Forest Conservation Act? Because in the year Indian Forest Act, which was enacted in 1927, it had lacunae or the gaps, and it was primarily enacted so as to meet the colonial interest. Okay, which was basically timber production or timber extraction. But conservation of forest was considered to be important, and as a result in 1980 Forest Conservation Act was enacted. Its jurisdiction again covers entire India, and it has 5 sections. It has been amended once in the year 1988. What are the objectives of Forest Conservation Act? To maintain the ecology, okay, first, then preserve the forest, very very important, regenerate the forest by afforestation, to protect all the ecological components of the forest, to maintain the integrity of the forest, to prevent the land erosion, and also to prevent the diversion of the forest land for any other purpose, that is for agricultural cultivation or building of businesses or residential units. Then we have discussed about the various features of this act, and we have discussed the international agreements. Montreal Protocol, again it is a protocol on ozone depleting substances. Okay, so it sets out the target so as to phase out the ozone depleting substances, and that it is an obligatory agreement. Countries have to implement it, and the targets are set, or a deadline is given to phase out a particular ozone depleting substance. Then we have this, and also we have said that, or we I have told you that it is a most successful international agreement so far. Okay, then Kyoto Protocol, it is just an extension of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, but it recognizes common but differentiated responsibility. So the developed countries are held more responsible for the greenhouse gas emissions, and it establishes this carbon credit system. I told you what are carbon credits. Okay. Then Convention on Biological Diversity, again a multilateral treaty for biodiversity conservation. Where is the secretariat? It is in Montreal, Canada, and there are 2 additional protocols with respect to the convention. Nagoya Protocol, which is regarding the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising out of the genetic resources, and the second was the Cartagena Protocol. This is regarding the biosafety of living modified organisms. We have extensively discussed both of these protocols.